Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever the heck you guys are tuning in from. It's your boy Idris, and today's an exciting episode because quick context, I got Kyle Odefey over here with me. The funny thing is, and I'm not sure if you remember this, but we actually met 3 years ago at an event hosted by TikTok, if I'm not wrong. It was like a
Yeah.
content event, like how to hack content or whatever. And then it was just like random. I went there with my manager, was trying to learn some tips, and then we bumped into you, and then you were like, "Oh, I just like start." I don't know if you just started living in London because I know you studied in University of Lincoln, right? Oh, you probably moved to from
Yeah.
Lincoln to
So
London,
the
right?
the context was I had just started at Synthesia like
Yes,
3 weeks before. So I was
that's
literally
crazy.
just starting in London at that point, which is
Yeah,
wild to think about because so much has changed since then.
yeah,
But like it
yeah.
was it was insane. Like I when you reached out to do this pod, I was like, oh my gosh, dude, like it's already been like 3 years, but
I
like
know.
we've like messaged each other back and forth a
Yeah,
little bit, but like
yeah,
I've
yeah, yeah.
obviously followed your journey, you've been following
Yes,
mine. So like
yes,
it's
yes.
just so wild how that works sometimes.
I know. Yeah, so exactly. It's just exactly that. So it's just freaking wild that like 3 years on and we reconnected. We're doing this, so which is I'm super grateful for. And I love that we've been in touch as well since then. How about you give an introduction to yourself, man, and about like what you do at Synthesia, and then also what you do on site creatively as well, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Kyle Odefey. I am a creative video producer working in the European tech space. Over the last couple of years, I've worked for a company called Synthesia, which is the world's leading AI video platform. And I've had lots of different responsibilities and roles over the last couple of years in that space. I started
Mm,
as a video editor and then moved into video producing. But
mm,
I also do a lot of freelance with different journalists and influencers and have the opportunity to like really collaborate with people to talk about what European tech looks like on social media. And so
right.
that can range from doing, very small scale UGC projects to,
Mm,
very large scale high end shoots with like
yeah.
customers and clients where
Yeah.
you're communicating about AI and European tech across various types of formats. And so
Yeah.
it's been very, very versatile. But
Yeah.
on top of that, I also write and direct short films. I've been a filmmaker since I was growing up in the Midwestern United States, and I still currently write and direct a lot of shorts. I'm currently in post production on my latest short film, In Search of Milder
Yes.
Weather, which is going to come
Yes.
out later this year, which is
Yep.
really exciting.
Awesome, dude. That was a strong introduction, man. I appreciate it. I love that. For anyone listening who aren't that familiar with what you do on a day to day, what does being a video producer look like in Synthesia? And also, I guess when you started out as a video editor as well, like how has that journey been?
Yeah, it's changed rapidly over the last 3 years, I'd say. So
Mm.
when I started in March of 2023, I was hired to work on TikTok content. We had a
Oh,
Synthesia TikTok channel called AI
yes.
Explains AI, which was
Yeah.
UGC. It
Yeah.
was very much, you have an AI avatar presenting news information. And so there
Mm-hmm.
was no, it was faceless content pretty much.
Mm.
Anybody
Mm.
could make it. You just have to like go on Synthesia, make an AI avatar, type in what you want the avatar to say, and then you go bring that into like Premiere Pro or whatever, and you make a little TikTok video. And so it was
Yeah.
much more news organization. It had nothing really to do with the company whatsoever.
Right. Okay.
So the first 6 months or so, we're just mostly making these like TikTok videos that were going, just
Yeah.
on TikTok. We occasionally would
Yeah.
do some live streams as well,
Yeah.
but over time, we kind of realized that like that wasn't the best use of our time and resources because we're
Mm.
obviously not promoting the company as much. It
Yes.
wasn't like, pushing the company narrative and everything. Like it was obviously showing the technology. And at that point, it was so very new, because it was like AI had
Mm.
only just kicked up, I think,
Yeah.
in November of 2022 at that rate. And that when I
Yeah.
joined, it was like 6 months after that. So
Yeah.
there was a lot of momentum and movement there. But to
Yeah.
like really share the company narrative, we needed to
Yeah.
pivot. And so 6 months into the job, our whole team gets transferred into marketing. My boss gets let go and we start fresh. And we
Yeah.
have this content and community team, which is
Yeah.
focused on just doing social media for all the Synthesia channels. And
Mm.
over the 2 years that I was working under that team, we basically realized that video and like real practical video was
Mm.
essential to sharing how Synthesia communicates with their audience and their followers.
Mm. Mm.
So in my sense, I come from a film production background. I went to school for film production. I had all these skills and I'm sitting here editing these TikToks and I'm like, I could do something practical here. You know,
Yeah,
I could
yeah,
actually really sit down and like talk to the people that are making these avatars, or talk to the people that are engineering or coding or whatever, and hear
yeah,
their side of the story and talk
yeah,
about how Synthesia is a great place to work.
yeah.
So initially what we started to do was these like these testimonials, like internal company testimonials, where you're interviewing like different C-level executives about joining Synthesia, because at that
Sure.
point, you know, we were hiring and building out our team, trying to figure out what like the company was like.
Yeah.
And all of that put together, you know, we started to get lots and lots of video projects out that were
Mm,
talking about the company culture and
mm,
promoting Synthesia across social in a way that we hadn't before. And
mm,
then throughout that, we also started doing client testimonials where we'd go to live events and
mm,
we'd shoot,
mm.
you know, customer stories where it was like, oh, here's this really cool thing that Synthesia's allowed us to unlock and do. And
Yeah,
then we uploaded those to the website, kept building those out. And
yeah,
over the last 2 years, it just
yeah.
became so apparent that you could have somebody internally running this video department to
Yeah.
produce content for the wide spectrum of
Gotcha.
Synthesia as a company, not
Yeah,
necessarily just social media.
yeah,
So I started doing PR projects. I started doing comms. I
yeah,
started working with influencers and
yeah,
celebrities, and like basically being the go-to video guy for
yeah,
whenever anything needed to be communicated.
yeah,
And most of my day-to-day was social media, but then there was
yeah.
also things like product launches and announcements and keynote events that we would do where I'd travel and go to like Copenhagen or wherever to film those.
Yeah.
And now we're actually in this kind of weird period where it's pivoting again. And we're actually
Okay.
now focusing more on like comedy skits and shorts. And we're kind of switching
A
up
bit
the narrative
steam.
from being more like B2B to
Yeah,
B2C, which
yeah,
is
yeah,
very different. And seeing that transition and seeing that change has been very, very interesting, but
yeah,
it allows you to create in kind of a different way than we normally were for the last
yeah,
couple of years, and do something that's a bit different and exciting. And that also for me means I get to travel around a lot and get to like be in different places where the business is represented. So like
yeah,
I'm going to New York this week, for instance, to go and
yeah,
shoot content at a live event. And like that's super cool because like we
yeah,
get to actually be front and center with customers, share their stories, talk to people about the event, what that's like, and
yeah,
then actually go out and like really get some cool content out of the deal that can be like a really good conversation starter for what Synthesia is as a company and as a culture.
yeah. That's super cool, man. There's so many things that I want to pick out from, but during the time when you guys were pivoting, at least during the time when you were video editing mainly on TikTok, were you the one driving that more of a storytelling element push?
For sure, for sure. I think
Yeah.
there was a lack of understanding what the company culture was from the outside, simply
Mm,
because nobody had those skills of actually sharing that. They
yeah.
had done videos before that were like large scale advertisements that were like, it was like kind of like a pitch video where they showed like what Synthesia was and they hired like an
Mm,
agency to shoot it and everything. But they had
mm,
never done anything that was like a visual stamp of like, this is what Synthesia looks like through motion and through video.
yes.
And
Yes.
over time, you know, we developed a brand team, which, you know, kind of built out how like graphically things look. But then
Yeah.
also video was so crucial to that because so much of
Yeah.
social media's output is video.
Right.
And so I got the chance to work alongside like our brand and our PR and comms teams and social
Nice.
to actually
Nice.
shape what that sort of style of storytelling and that style of sharing that narrative looked like.
Yeah.
And that's something that we're always constantly evolving, I would say, on the day to day. But
Nice.
it's still one of those things that like I get to be hands on with all the time, and no one day is ever the same. You know,
Yeah.
you really get to be flexible with it.
I remember watching, I think it was a podcast that you were on as well, Ventures. I think it was
Yeah,
in August
Ventures.
last
Yeah,
year. And you mentioned, you mentioned about how the audience in TikTok was like, they were just degrading in a way in terms of, because they was just used to seeing that AI slop. And that's why I assume the engagements, the views weren't just converting from a Synthesia point of view. And I think that pivot to more of that behind the scenes storytelling definitely drove that increased engagement, right?
it was a huge factor in it for sure. I think the
Yeah.
interesting thing at that point with TikTok in like early 2023 was that like if you had started like a TikTok channel using AI in 2022, you were
Yeah.
already way ahead of the curve of so many
True.
people, because it was like that level of creating with that type of content just didn't
Mm.
exist. And
Yeah.
those who came to it first got ahead of the curve. They were able to build a really big channel following. And AI
Yeah.
Explains AI was very much a product of that time.
Mm.
And as we saw more and more AI channels popping up in 2023, obviously everything got very diversified and audiences are going to, you know, various types of channels. And when the company wants to like actually really promote what it is as a company across social, it's like, that's not really, if you're just talking about news and technology, like from a UGC perspective, if this was an individual creator,
Yes.
that would make sense, right?
Yeah.
But it's a company that's backing it and they need to see like tangible results. And so there was this big discussion of like, can we still kind of do this sort of content or can we pivot? And actually most of the stuff we do today on TikTok is still a lot of that like news kind of like, if you want to use this AI tool, you can use it to help boost productivity or whatever, or also just share like AI news and updates around the world, because I think so much of that social flywheel is coming from different announcements in AI and then being able to jump on it and say, okay, here's how Synthesia could integrate into this, or here's how AI avatars could integrate into this, you know? So there is still a very big part of that, but I'm hands off on TikTok now. I've not done anything with the TikTok channel since it would have been January 2025. So been a long time. Yeah, I have no time anymore to do it, but it's still one of those things that like I like watching, and I'm glad I got to be a part of it when I did. I had some really cool successes as well. Like one of the videos that we did was like an AI podcast. It was around the time Notebook LM came out. It was very, very exciting. I
love Notebook LM.
Yeah, it's super cool. And we did like this podcast video where it was like some viral clip that somebody had made of these two podcast voices realizing that they were AI. And we humanized that with AI avatars. That video got like 3.7 million views. We did another one that also got like another 3.7. And then that became a parody on SNL that they did in January with Timothée Chalamet, which was wild. That was insane. I had nothing like that before. And I was like, that's crazy. And that was right around the time that I jumped off of TikTok. And so I was just super thrilled that I had like a really nice win before I said, I'm done, I'm retiring, I'm moving on to like actual video production stuff, because that's where they needed me. You know, that's where I needed to be. So
wow, dude, that's awesome, man. Looking at your role now, so it sounds like you're much more hands-off, and now your role now requires you to your point, travel around, sort of brings Synthesia to the customers and just showcase whatever that Synthesia requires you to showcase to customers, and that would include, I guess, PR and any more of those like live journaling, if I'm not wrong, or like just like storytelling.
Yeah, I would say it's more just like how Synthesia is shaped, like what the narrative of Synthesia is, why you should join, interaction with customers. A lot of the stuff I'm doing these days is like production management as well. So, you know, if we're hiring agencies to work on larger scale projects, I'm directing those agencies and basically telling them this is the sort of video that we want to create. Because when you're a one-man person in an AI company that does video, you're obviously going to lack resources, even if you have all of the professional gear and stuff. And we have another team that's not actually in social, but they do avatar production, which is still in the company, and they still like operate and everything. And they've got some film production experience. But most of the work that we're doing is like, you know, very small scale. But if we ever need anybody that's like larger or like larger productions, then we bring in other people, and it's up to me to manage and like set expectations for what sort of content we're creating. And so that can be like customer stories or you know, skits or social media stuff, like, you know, stunts or whatever it might be. All that stuff is very flexible. And so, like I said, you really jump around each day depending on what's going on and what sort of, you know, content we're trying to produce.
The thing that I find interesting is you are doing a full-time job that really allows you to flex and bring in some of the learnings that you've got from your film production, if I'm not wrong. And it was even before then. I know you've been doing short films for like, I guess, would you say it's been like close to 10 years now?
For sure.
Or even maybe longer than that. I don't know. I'm sure you have some other videos that aren't in YouTube, for example. How would you say your overall life is like day to day? Do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel enriched that you're able to go through this without, I guess, being fatigued? Because the reason why I'm asking is because some of my guests, for example, my first guest, he's like a sustainability analyst, but he does stand-up comedy on the side. Two different worlds that you really wouldn't, you know, expect to happen. And I think for me, when I'm speaking to you, it's like, it seems like it's like a marriage of both worlds. So
sure, it for sure is. And I think, interestingly, one of the really nice things about this job, and something that surprised me very early on, was how supportive Synthesia as a company is to side hustles. and like really just making the most of your own projects outside of work, because they know that if you go and do these projects and they do well and stuff, you can then take that knowledge and transfer it into the work that you're doing on the day to day. So very early on, I think in my first year, I had worked on a short film that I had written maybe in 2 or 3 months. And I shot it, I think in May of 2023. And it was very, very small, but like I posted it on my LinkedIn, and like the COO and the CEO were liking the post about it and everything. And I was like, hey, that's actually pretty good. Like that means that I can do this and not feel like weighed down by it or feel like I need to put that aside. Because I've been at companies before where if you do something on the side, or you're trying to build out your own social media brand or whatever it might be, the company might be very apprehensive to that and say like, oh, you can't do that, you know? And I've seen that more often than not. So when I found that out, when I realized, oh yeah, like I can still do this and still get a lot of support from it, that has allowed me now to then go and do other projects on the side. But I think going back to your question about like feeling fulfilled and feeling balanced, I do, because I have the ability to do both these things on the side, and they don't necessarily eat into each other because it's a different discipline, you know, like social media as an art form, if you will, is very different in terms of structure, in terms of pacing, in terms of how you're conveying a message. Whereas film is a much more meticulous process. It takes a lot of time. It's you know, it's acting. It's multiple people coming together to create something rather than you as an individual. You know, both can be a team effort, but in truth, it's like they have such different mindsets where you can kind of just switch your brain off the second you're done for the day and then prioritize something like a film, whether it's writing, whether it's directing, whether it's acting. Obviously, it's a much longer time frame, like a time you know, window to create that sort of stuff, because you're spending so much of your time at work. But you can still do that, in my case, and get really good results from it.
Wow. Dude, that's awesome. I love that. I really love that. And what you mentioned segues into you probably touched on it already, but this is a favorite question of mine that I love to ask all my guests. But what's the transferable learning that you've taken from each side of your life, essentially, and how have you applied it to one another?
Sure. Production management, number one, probably being the most important, which is like, how do you organize and manage people, crews, equipment, you know, like what's the sort of like outcome that you're trying to get with the resources you have? Also, how can you maximize with what you have? You know, you like, let's say maybe you only have like so much time, you know, like what sort of schedule can you create to like get through the shoots or the shots that you need to do on that day? It's allowed me to just like understand what's possible given the like limitations that we have.
For sure.
And then also like people as well, like surprisingly, like a lot of the folks at Synthesia in the early days, we actually had like a production studio, and a lot of those people are in the film industry, and we're in the film industry. And so like a lot of those people transferred over then into my own work, into like the films and stuff that we were doing. So like networking is another crazy thing, which doesn't always happen, but like that was huge for getting my film off the ground and making it a reality. But aside from that, more just like understanding how to direct, understanding how to like communicate with people, especially like clients or celebrities or journalists, when you need to like just really get to the point on something. Like it's allowed me to be a better director in a lot of ways, where I can just say, okay, I want to do this. We're going to go through this process today. You know, like I direct avatars at Synthesia often, where like if a journalist will come in, like the BBC or Forbes or whoever, they'll come in and I will say, okay, here's how we direct an avatar. And that process is like tedious. It's repeatable. But also like that same sort of like way of speaking, that way of thinking, you know, very much goes into the space of actually directing actors on set, where you can be like, okay, this is the sort of intention that I'm going for. This is sort of mood or vibe that I want to convey in your performance. Let's try to find a way to get through this together, because it's all about that communication back and forth, trying to say, okay, this is what I want to be doing, and this is what I want you to achieve out of this from my perspective.
And has it improved you in your ability to be a better filmmaker overall as well?
Yes, 100%. I would say, I agree. It definitely would be, because the amount of opportunities that I had to just flex my creative muscles at Synthesia through some of the various projects that we did, whether it was even just shadowing like larger agencies or larger production companies, like that was so valuable to then when I turned around last November and I worked on my film for 3 days,
Yeah.
I was working with a crew of 20 people. I was managing expectations, understanding like what I could and couldn't do,
Yeah.
again, very different disciplines and stuff. But like a lot of film sets are very much the same. Like it's the same
Yeah.
thing in principle where you set up a shot for 45 minutes, you wait for everything to get set up and then you run and you roll it for 2 minutes. And then
Yeah.
the next thing is you're moving on, you're doing a completely different setup that takes another 45 minutes. And then you're kind of just like waiting for stuff to happen. But once things are happening, once you're locked into it, then it's like, okay, let's get going. Let's do
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
then you go from there. So I've been able to learn a lot from the job and through the different opportunities I've had to just like work in my craft, work in my skill set, and then transfer that over to the film world.
You reminded me of a time. It wasn't too long ago. I was an extra in what was it? I don't remember. It was like a film or something, like a short
Oh,
film.
wow.
And yeah, my partner got invited to become an extra, and they needed an extra person. So I was like, I would love to do that. And
Oh, it's so
when,
cool.
when you mentioned about like 45 minutes and just like once its action is locked in, yeah, it's totally true. And I'm like, you have to account for the multiple takes. You have to account for like, okay, if someone if the lead actor isn't the most expressive in certain shots or whatever, then it's like retake. And it kind of got me thinking, wow, that there's actually so many factors to take into when you're creating a short film, and you don't
100%.
really think about it. At least for me, as someone who is sort of like a film enjoyer, but once you speak to someone who does it, or once you're involved in it properly, then it's like, wow, okay, there's so much things going on.
100%. It's all about intention, right?
Mm,
So the world of a film director or somebody that's writing and directing something, they obviously have a kind of a grandiose vision, which is
mm,
often distilled down to a theme, some
mm,
idea that they want to convey.
mm,
And that's told through the story and the characters and the acting, and then also how you light it and what
mm,
space you're in and like
mm,
what the environment is and how you're pacing the scene and editing the scene. Like there's so many little parts to the process, whether that be a short film, TV film,
mm,
whatever it might be.
mm.
There's a larger narrative happening, and there's so many choices that are being made that like subconsciously you wouldn't think have been thought about, but they
Yeah,
have.
yeah,
Somebody on a department has been like, oh, we're going to do this way because it helps support the larger theme. It
right,
actually builds towards something. So,
yeah,
for instance, my film, In Search of Milder Weather, is a movie
yeah,
about displacement at its core. It's about
yeah.
these two immigrants that have recently broken up and they've come back together for this family wedding. And they are
Um,
together kind of in the early morning of this wedding before it happens. And they're
yeah,
trying to like reconcile and connect. And it's very, very difficult. And, what we were thinking about the whole time was like the space and the environment. So we actually
mm,
shot in a very like wide open room where the
yeah,
actors could move around the space and be distanced from each other, which at a very,
okay,
very like high level allowed kind of for that distance to happen between the characters. And then we'd obviously bring them closer together when there was, larger conflict. But then
yeah,
like thinking about how they're positioned in the frame and like
yeah,
who's got the higher level of power in the scene, like who's kind of
right,
leading that. You could be
wow,
very, very intentional with that. And even as an example here, like we had what's called the shot reverse shot, where you kind of go
mm,
back and forth between the two characters in the
mm,
edit. And in some of the shots, if one of the characters was relying more on that character, you would see them kind of on the side of that person's frame. So you'd have your, like our female lead character would be the same, like the main person in the subject, the main subject in the frame. And
yeah,
then our male lead was kind of off center on the other side. And then when we cut back to him, he's the
yeah.
only one in his frame because she's not caring for him the same way that he's caring for her.
Whoa.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Holy cow. That is
Yeah.
dope. That is
So
really
that's
dope.
how deep you can go here. And that's been
Yeah.
used by many people. Like I don't want to say that that's not my idea, right? But
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
that is something that you can do. And it's just
Yeah.
like one of those really like small things that not a lot of people would pick up on, but it works. It does a
Mm,
job. It's like just very, very subtle things that kind of push you towards thinking, oh, this character is maybe leaning more towards this way. Or
yeah.
this character is definitely much more closed off because they're on
Yeah.
their own, you
Yeah.
know? So you can
It
use it
kind
in
of
a lot of different ways. Yeah.
yeah. It kind of makes sense. Like when I watch certain films, for example, certain characters are maybe they get more light, and certain characters get more like more shadow, and then that
Yes.
sort of is what's the right word? It's like a foreshadowing of like, oh,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah, yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yep.
that's really cool. When I watched the trailer from In Search of Mild Weather, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know that that was the part at the time until you shared it with me. But even when I was watching the trailer, I could feel the sort of there was tension that was like, that was being invoked, and it didn't really take long for it to just shine through. And I'm just amazed by how that was done. And I feel like when I watch some of your like films on YouTube. By the way, I have like a list of favorites that I like. By the way,
Oh my gosh, I'd love to
so,
hear them actually. I'm super
so
excited.
Dormscape
Wow.
number one. I
Oh
think
my
I think
gosh.
I,
Wow.
I love I love I love how you how you did it in a way. It's like you know, like when you watch like certain like videos. And by the way, this isn't me trying to say it's like for like, but certain videos, like especially on music, for example, like they'll make like certain like
Yes.
sound effects like that.
Yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah, yeah,
so
100%.
yeah, so that when I was watching that, I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. But then like even then, towards the end when you were just like mashing it all together, I was like, huh, that's interesting. Um, 6 hours indefinitely. I
Yeah.
loved it because I feel the male lead, for example, I feel like I could relate to him as a person just
Mm.
because it's more of a realist. And at the moment, I'm trying to work myself moving from a realist or pessimist, let's be real here, to more of an optimist, which is
Yeah.
what I was portrayed in the female lead. So that was pretty cool. Notebook poems, volume two in
Oh,
specific.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say those three are my top three. But then obviously, I'm gonna need to rewatch all of them again. But like those are the ones where I felt something, basically.
I gotta say, like, I'll say, like, Dormscape was one of those films for me that was really special. I made it when I was in university, and
Mm.
we got sent to a few film festivals at the time, which
Yes.
was very exciting. It was one of the first projects that I had that like I actually got to like claim as my own film that got in. It was like
Yeah.
my own thing that I did, and it was such a cool project. I mean, for context, for anyone that's curious, it was a film
Yeah.
about taking multiple objects in a dormitory in the
Yeah.
U.S. and just
Yeah.
like making a soundscape out of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was one of the first, like, I think like even today I'm like I could probably do even more with that concept. Like I could have just
Sure.
gone like even a couple steps further. But I loved just experimenting around with sounds and like seeing what I could build. And
Yeah.
that's gone into many other projects that I've done as well, where you use sound as a way to convey narrative and
Yeah.
like think of more about emotions and how things are going. But at a
Yeah.
very high level, like Dormscape was just kind of an experimentation of how do you kind
Mm,
of merge sounds together in a way that's fun and interesting. And then 6 Hours Indefinitely, which is one of my, I think, all time favorite films that I've ever done.
mhm.
That film for me was like one of those films when I made it, I was like, this feels like a natural progression. Feels like I've actually done something here
Yeah.
that is so much more aligned to a style that I want to tell in filmmaking.
Right.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
very like romantic drama. There's
Yes.
it's very slow. There's a lot of chemistry
Yeah.
between myself and our female lead, who I
Yeah.
actually was dating at the time, which was very weird to say. We also broke up 2 weeks later, so that was
Oh
very
crap.
crazy as well.
Yeah.
But that film sits in a very interesting space and time for me where I watched that and I'm like, this was such a cool project to work on. And like,
Yeah.
despite the situation, like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
was one of my favorites. And then that carried on into A Birth in Kalmar, which was the follow up to that. And now
Right.
Milder Weather is almost kind of like a continuation of those ideas in its
Interesting.
own kind of separate space, but in a much more mature way, I think, in a
Mm,
way that those two films didn't do, which is very, very exciting. And then Notebook Poems as well, also really fun. Those were done during COVID, and it was me literally just
okay.
writing stuff in a little notebook and
Yeah.
then just taking kind of clips and material from shorts that I hadn't finished or didn't really know how to develop and kind of put them into these little vignettes. And
Yeah.
that was really fun to just test my cinematography and like see what I
Yeah.
could actually do. And yeah, I think elements of all three of those projects have kind of led themselves into what In Search of Milder Weather is now, which is,
Mm,
much more high budget,
yeah.
better performances, better acting,
Yeah.
better cinematography. There's a lot more
Yeah.
intention in it, but like
Yeah.
they were all foundational pieces, which
Yes.
got me to the place where I am today, where, I spent a whole year and a half developing
Yeah.
this new short on the
Yeah.
basis of the shorts that came before. And,
Yeah.
was able to use all of those as stepping stones to get to where I am today.
For those who don't understand how long it takes to develop a short film, like, can you talk me through, like, realistically, what is actually involved? And I think you've mentioned some of it. previously. But I'd love to hear how long it'll take, what's involved, etc.
Sure. So let's break it down into two categories. You can do like super uber low budget or no budget short films, which for a
Okay.
very long time this was what I was doing.
Yeah.
Where I'd have an idea, I'd get together with some friends, we'd maybe write the script over a couple weeks or a month or whatever it might be, and then we film it over 2 or 3 days, sometimes even just a day, depending on what's going on. For instance, 6 Hours Indefinitely shot with 4 of my friends in literally 6 hours. We shot it just over one evening in January.
Great. Yeah.
We then turned that around and edited it, I think somewhere within like a month or 2 months. And then that was released, pretty quickly afterwards. No film festival run for that or anything. It was just kind of going up on YouTube. And then eventually it did get into film festivals on the side. But that whole process, I think, took maybe 5 or 6 months to produce. Whereas In Search of Milder Weather, which is the first like proper budget film where I've actually got a budget behind it, where I've raised money to make the film possible, that film took well over 1.5 years to develop. So from the very beginning, I came up with the idea in, I think it was August of 2024. I didn't start writing it until November, December 2024.
Gotcha.
And I must have written the drafts for 5 or 6 months. I finished writing the film, I believe it was at the very end of July of last year. Right. In the meantime, I was starting to cast and look for actors. I was working with producers to figure out logistics. I was bringing on a larger crew of people, folks like cinematographers and gaffers who are like lighting design people, hair and makeup, that sort of thing. And those are all people that are obviously specialized and are working in the industry professionally. So, negotiating rates, organizing like our budget, knowing how much to spend in different places, working with our producers to like manage all of that and bring on people at the right moments. Then when the script was written, we then had to figure out the location. I actually knew the people that we rented the location from. It was it's actually one of our old studios that Synthesia used to use for avatars. So it worked out really, really well. And then just like literally logistically figuring out when we were going to film it. And that took the longest time. We were supposed to film it, I think, in early to late May. We had a draft that was like pretty much good to go. And we were going to film it in May, April time. Yeah. And then we pushed it back because we needed to raise more money and we needed to like just figure out what we were going to do with it. And then over the summer, I raised more money, figured out what I wanted to go with it. And then we shot it in November. We hired 20 plus crew members, all industry professionals, people that were working on like Apple TV shows and Netflix shows and stuff like that, just through personal connections, right? And then, making it work over those 3 days. You have 8 hours basically each day to shoot so many scenes. And for us, the film was 16 pages long. That's about 17 minutes of screen time, give or take.
Okay.
And, for that time, some of the scenes are a lot longer. Some of them had some really interesting camera movements and stuff. So you obviously have to schedule and plan that in. That's where like an assistant director comes in, where you're working with somebody on the scheduling and management of everything. You're obviously doing rehearsals with actors in the build up to those 3 days. Yes. And then once the 3 days happens, it's just your run and gun. You're just going as fast as you can, getting everything you need, making compromises. There's always going to be things that break, things that don't work. Yeah. For instance, my cinematographer, my camera guy, got sick the morning of our first day of filming, and he had to drop out, which is horrible. That's always really hard to deal with. Now, he and I had been working together on the film for well over 1 year at that point. And it was like, what the heck do we do? So our gaffer, who's our lighting guy, actually stepped in and became the camera guy, the DP. And we worked with him. I worked with him over the first day. We kind of, tried to see if it was a good fit. And by the end of the day, I was like, this works out great. He's doing a fantastic job. So I got very lucky, right? But we shot with him over the last 2 days, and it worked out great. It was a really, really fun project, really worked out well. And then after that, now we're in post-production. So we actually just got the first cut of the film today from my editor, which is very exciting. And then we're going to do things like sound mixing, score, like organizing the edit, doing like festival run and stuff. So our plan is to get the film done within the next like month and a half, 2 months. So, we'll then be ready to go and send it off to film festivals and, go back on that circuit and share it with people. And then hopefully we'll share it to the public sometime later this year, maybe, or early next year. So,
And how can the public tune into that? Like, will it be in, I don't know, like Everyman or something, or will it be on YouTube, or how does it
I
usually
think
work?
eventually we'll do YouTube or like Vimeo release for it.
Okay. Okay.
It will take some time, usually with short films, when you go and put them in the festival circuit, the
Yeah.
idea is that you want to kind of have them be exclusive to those places so that
Gotcha.
people can actually go and see them, right? And then that also gives you as a filmmaker the opportunity to connect with people at these screenings,
Yeah.
because they're also people that are like promoting their own films, and then
Yeah.
that can lead to better collaborations and more networking. And then you go from there, and you get to really make something special again with these new connections and people that you've met. So eventually YouTube will be the release. I'm looking probably later next year
Next year.
for that to
Yeah. Yeah.
happen,
For
but
sure.
there's going to be probably a premiere screening with like friends and family and stuff before that as
My
well, which will be very
gosh.
exciting.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. This is really cool, man. This is really exciting for me just because like I love understanding like how things work and like what goes in the nitty gritty side of things, and with just the way when you were explaining to me, it was just like wow, how do I don't know how you deal with it honestly, but like it really shows that you really enjoyed this. So, um, yeah, so that's amazing. And out of curiosity, like how does the funding process go? Like how much of it was crowdfunding? How much of it was, I guess, personal as well, or even from like friends and family donation?
Yeah, so I mean, it was kind of a mix of a couple different places. We self-funded it mostly, so I put
Gotcha.
in a lot of my money to make it happen.
Yeah.
But a lot of that came from both paycheck and then also freelance opportunities, because I do freelance on the side,
Yeah.
where I'm actually working with like influencers and content creators to help produce their content across social. So
Sick.
a chunk of it came from that, which is very nice. And like those guys are going to get special thanks, of course, because
Yeah.
they're financiers of the film. But in
Yeah.
the future, the plan is to go like and get grant funding, which is where you
Nice.
then go and you actually like you build kind of like a pitch deck and all the materials about like what your film is trying to do and say, and you send it to places like the BFI or
Yeah.
different councils around England, and you can then use that as leverage to then get more money to actually make the film possible. And
Yeah.
looking ahead, the next film that I do will definitely need to utilize that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we'll get there when we get there. But like
Yeah.
I just wanted to do a film that I could like fully control at this rate,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
there's a lot of pros and cons to that, but overall, like it was well worth it. I like the fact that I got something out of it that I'm very proud of was huge. So
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And I realized when I was watching some of your films, they're all like film nominated or like festival nominated. Uh,
most, yeah.
how does a film get nominated? Like, what's the process for that? Do you essentially just pitch to a specific festival, they review it, and then they'll just nominate you for a particular category, or do you nominate yourself for each category that you think is relevant to what your film think can I don't know can get nominated on?
Yeah, it really depends. So sometimes it can be a situation where you literally just reach out to a film festival and you say, "Hey, we've got this film. We think it would work
Mm,
really, really well in your program, and would you be interested in hosting it?" In
mm.
other cases, often the case is you just go and submit on to like there's a place called Film Freeway, which is kind of
Okay.
like a film portal where you kind of host your short, and that is then shared with film festivals. You can like select film festivals that you want to apply to. You
Yeah.
usually have to pay a little bit of money to get into the film festivals, and that's
Okay.
not a guarantee that you actually get in. It's still a gamble,
Ah.
right?
Okay. Okay.
But you at least get to try and go from
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
then if it goes, the idea is that often you go to the film festival and you get to do like a Q&A or a promotion or whatever it might be. But it
Ah.
is a gamble. Like you never know. I've had some
Yeah.
films where I've submitted and I've not gotten into any of the festivals I selected.
Yeah.
Other times I've gotten into all of them. It really just depends like
See.
what the goal is. And when it comes to film festivals, often what they'll do is they'll program blocks of shorts, and they're often looking for, does it fit within the context of the stuff we're programming, and
Sure.
is it like long enough, short enough to fit alongside a bunch of films? Because ideally what a lot of film festivals are doing is they're probably trying to program shorts that are anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes, and then
Yeah.
they can block those in and do like a larger kind of program with them. So it really does depend, depending on like how high profile you are. You can also just, often reach out to the film festivals. And if you've got some leverage, you might be able to do that too. But
Yeah.
in general, like it's kind of just like trying your luck and seeing what you can do. So it's never a guarantee, but
Yeah.
still, it's a really fun thing to do. And when you get that recognition, of course, it's super great because then you can share it around. And that also, I think, just gives people awareness of like your credibility and like what you can
Yeah.
actually do and how you create and how you think. So it's always a good sign to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And what would you say is your like how were you able to get most of your films shortlisted or nominated? Was there a formula that you eventually noticed or you cracked it, and then that's how you're able to get a lot of them nominated?
Not really, to be honest. Like, I think the thing is, like, there's no secret to this, right? Like,
Yeah.
this isn't like a hacking the system sort of thing. It's
Sure.
actually
Sure.
more like how is the programmer thinking about the
Mm,
selection of films that it's putting in? Does the
mm,
film make sense for the context of what the festival's about? So,
mm,
if there
mm,
was one way to kind of hack the system, quote unquote, it's
mm,
looking for film festivals that have a track record of showing films that are similar, or
mm.
maybe like looking at like what they've done in the past to
Yeah.
then say, okay, maybe my film would fit in here. And I think that often works for a lot of film festivals and a lot of like submissions. I
Yeah.
never did that back in the day.
Yeah.
It was more just
Yeah.
like, oh, I have these regional film festivals. Like when I was living in Minnesota, we
Yeah.
had the South Dakota Film Festival, which I got to
Yes.
go to over many years, and
Yeah.
I got to know the programmers there very well. And it was like, oh, I know my film would probably work here. And
Yeah.
every time I'd submit to them, just about every
Yeah.
time, they were like, yeah, we'd love to see it. And that was always so nice, because like I understood like what they were going for and like what types of films they
Right.
show.
Okay.
So that helps, but
Yeah.
it's not necessarily a given every single time, right?
Gotcha.
Sometimes
Gotcha.
there might just be a certain festival that programs certain films and you're like, oh, I'd like to do that. Or, it might just be one that helps with notoriety, like a
Yeah.
Sundance or Cannes,
Yeah.
but those are obviously very, very high level and very competitive.
Yeah.
And you might get in, you might not. And then
Mm.
with those too, when it's high level like that, often they'll want you to premiere the film there if it goes through, which
Mm.
disqualifies any other film festivals you've like submitted to. It's like
Ah,
exclusivity,
okay.
right?
Okay,
So it's like a
okay,
gamble
okay.
too. So
Yeah,
you really
yeah.
have to think about it and be very strategic. Yeah.
Right. Do you have a particular festival that you eventually one day you're like, I want my short film made by Kyle Odefey to be premiered in?
I mean, Sundance would be really, really cool. Cannes would
Yeah,
be amazing.
yeah.
I feel like any of those would be great. TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival, would be really nice.
Mm.
Um, I think Telluride in Colorado would be really, really cool. I mean, just anywhere that can get me in the room with like more talented creators and start to network and like really show what I'm able to do on a wider scale. I
Yeah.
think it's always this kind of constant step up, this like, constantly learning and evolving and trying to figure out how can I make something at a higher level. And I think
Yeah.
if I can show that through my directing or even through my social work or whatever it might be,
Yes. Yes.
that's always the goal. It's always this kind of lifelong learning thing. And so
Yeah.
any opportunity I can get to keep showing and sharing like
Mm.
stories with people, that's my end goal, I think, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. And I mean, when I check out what you're doing at Synthesia, I mean, most recently I love what you guys did with it's like a news reporting thing where doing
Yeah, the hackathon.
Yeah, that was freaking cool. And even then, I've seen the one with NVIDIA, Jensen Huang. You were
Yes.
directing that, if I'm not wrong, or you were producing it.
I was filming, I was shooting it. So that's a fun story. That was really crazy. So I was with my parents actually the like Tuesday night before it happened, and I get a text from my boss. My family's visiting from the US, by the way. So like it's rare that I get to see them normally.
Yeah.
But like my boss texts me on WhatsApp and he's like, "Hey dude, this is crazy, but like Jensen Huang's team wants us to come to their hotel tomorrow to film some content around Synthesia and around their they had like this European tech event thing that we're doing." And so they were like, "Are you going to be around tomorrow to do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course, obviously." So I go over to the office that morning. I grab the camera. I'm like, "Okay, we're going to do this." We go hop on a train. We go to Hyde Park Corner, go to the super fancy hotel. I'm talking like White Lotus vibes. This was like
Oh wow,
crazy,
okay.
dude.
Yeah.
And I go up this elevator, go into this like rooftop bar thing, and they're like, "Okay, Jensen's going to come out this door. Make sure everyone's got mics ready and everything and good to go. You're just going to film for 20 minutes. They're going to have a conversation. He's going to give him a gift and he's going to go." And it's like, okay, all right, let's go do it. Let's lock in. Let's do it. And he shows up, we have this conversation. It's just me holding the camera going back and forth, back and forth. And I'm just like, this is so wild. Cause like I've seen this guy on so many videos. He's literally like leading the AI kind of race. Everything is going on because of Jensen. And I'm just like, dude, he's right there. He's right
Yeah.
there.
That's
And
crazy.
at the end and everything, he's like, let's get a photo. And it was like, okay. So we all just got in the photo together, and it was like, it was crazy. Like, it was such a cool deal and such a nice guy. I mean,
Yeah.
one of those people that is just so like is on another level when it comes to
Mm,
thinking about AI and tech
mm,
and
mm.
business strategy. Like he clearly made so many right moves, and
Yeah.
he could also be so technical as well. Like
Yes. Yeah.
he's got that very hardwired brain for CPUs and GPUs and all these different types of computing processes.
Yeah.
And just hearing them go back and forth, Vic and Steph and Jensen, like there was such an interesting conversation going on that like for the most part went over my head. But like I could tell, it's so important. It was like these guys are leading like how AI is being communicated. It was one of those moments for me that was very special, and I'm so thankful I got the chance to do that and to be
Yeah.
there and to be a part of that, because that was a real highlight. It was just like, wow, all of these things that I gotten to do have led
Yeah.
to this point, and
Yeah.
I'm doing this and it's fun. It's like a really cool project. And we then had to turn around after that. Like we had maybe 24 hours to turn, or it
Wow.
was 12 hours. We had 12 hours to turn around the social content. So I went back to the office and I edited the material super fast. And then we had to release it the next morning. And it was like, there you go. We were also the first people out of all the companies that Jensen met with, the
Yeah.
first company to actually release content surrounding that visit. I think 11 Labs, Waymo, and a few other people were there.
Yeah.
They all took like an extra week to get the content. And the
Ooh.
whole purpose of the video for NVIDIA was release it that week, release it the next day.
Yes.
And so it was like, it was speed. It was like,
Yeah.
you just got to
Yeah,
go
yeah, yeah.
fast. You got to do what
Yeah.
you got to do, get it done,
Yeah.
and go from there. But it was a great exercise. And like that mentality of just like locking in and just saying, okay,
Yeah.
here we go. We're going to do this.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's so important at Synthesia. And like, that's one of the reasons why it's been such a fun and exciting job for me.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And obviously that's on your portfolio, Jensen Huang and all that. So I'm sure like it'll all feed into what you're trying to achieve in life, filmmaking one day. Sundance is gonna come, bro. I promise you.
Heck yeah.
Or Cannes or TICC, TIFF. Sorry, TIFF.
TIFF, yeah.
All those. So yeah, I believe. I'm very curious within the world of filmmaking, like where would you say is your first love? Because there's so many moving parts to it, right? That there's like, I don't know, the scripting, the sort of like organizing. Now that you've refined that as you've gone on throughout your whole experience, organizing with talent, etc. Where would you say it is for you?
Gosh, I mean, I started doing film when I was a kid, right? So it initially started with post-production. This is actually why I started as a video editor, because like I had done so much editing throughout high school and then also in university in the US and the UK when I moved here in 2021. All of that came from just like working with computers and like understanding how pacing works in the wider scope of telling stories. But as a kid, it was less about film and more about just telling stories and sharing stories.
Yeah.
And for me, this is something that has been transcendent of any medium that I'm working in, which is the idea to tell human stories and stories that matter.
Yeah.
And in the grand scope of things, like that started through post-production, but then moved into writing and directing, and then also editing, and sometimes even acting, depending on what was going on.
Yeah.
But now it's to the point where it's like, if I can just convey a really interesting story with a really interesting company or a really interesting product, or it's a narrative about, something I really want to share, and it's very personal to me, like I will find ways to make that happen one way or another, because I do think it's important to share human stories, and especially in the context of artificial intelligence, when everyone is so afraid most of the time.
For sure.
And as we talked about earlier, like this idea of AI slop and everything, like we're no strangers to that, because it's like it's part of kind of our ecosystem and we're a part of that. But it's this idea of like, where are the human stories within AI? Because all of this stuff is being developed by people and people first, you know. So working in that space and being a part of it. But filmmaking as an art just kind of came naturally over time. It was one of those things where I realized I wanted to write. It was where I was like, I could edit, I can kind of share a vision and also share that to multiple people. And then those people can help kind of bring that vision to life as well.
Yeah.
And when you have that kind of symbiotic relationship where everybody's collaborating and coming up with something very special, you then can like tell a really, really interesting story and find ways to tell it in ways that maybe somebody else hadn't thought of. And that for me is like probably the best thing, like how collaborative it is, you know, and getting to work with people that you really care about, which is, really, really great.
It sounds like you've been through a lot of journey, especially with regards to your journey in Synthesia, also your personal journey as a filmmaker as well. How do you balance your time? When you're working at like, obviously a fast growing, is scale up the right term right now? Obviously, you guys just
I
raised
would
Series
say,
B. Scale up, or you're balancing a demanding creative job whilst also pursuing your own film projects. Like, how does it work in a day in the life, week of the life of Kyle?
I mean, gosh, it's not easy. At the end of the day, it's like you have, again, kind of that brain where your brain is switched on for social projects that often never stops after 6 p.m. rolls around, right? You are constantly thinking of different ideas that could be used across social, across film, and often the runway to create shorts or films, could take months to years to decades, and in the space of my life and what I've been able to do, it was really understanding that I didn't want to give that up. Because so many people, when I was in university and high school and all these places, they had that ambition or were like, I want to do this and I'm really interested in this. But then they didn't go and do anything with it. They kind of just got their day jobs and they just kind of sunk everything into that. And I've always been somebody that gives everything 110%, for better or for worse, right? And there's also this, very large pressure of me being an immigrant as well. And I think you can relate to this in some ways as well. But like the idea of like always having to just put your 100%, 110% into everything, because if that's taken away, it's really tough and you don't know what's going to happen, right? So for me, it's like you also like you have to, in your 9 to 5, 9 to 6, you got to do everything you got to do there. But then if you actually want to make a difference in the things that you enjoy and the things you like and the things that actually give your life true meaning, you do need to prioritize that. You need to find a way to work with other people to help bring that, make that possible, or, schedule time for yourself, block some time out, over the weekends. So much of my writing came from, full days where I was locked in my room here, just writing and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my story. It came from casting calls and producing and like, immediately getting off of work and being like, okay, I'm going to switch into Film Brain. And I'm going to try to figure out what I want to do with this short and how I want to, tell it. It just meant giving like that extra amount of energy to it when you maybe would have to like turn down hanging out with friends or going out or whatever, going for dinner, like going to see movies, all of that had to be put aside because that's what I needed to do to get the film off the ground. And I understand too, I'm in a very privileged position. I'm 27, I don't have a partner. I'm not married. I don't have kids, but like, you can still do this, I believe, even with those things in place. It's just, making sure, like knowing where your limits are and what your prioritization is exactly. All of that is so crucial to doing things that you love. And I think that's at the very core of it. It's like, I love doing this stuff. It brings me happiness. I know if I just did Synthesia day in and day out, I would be miserable. It's like, you got to have something that drives you. And it's not necessarily film for me all the time too. Like I journal, I write, we'll go and watch movies. Like it's like doing film theory and film history and like learning about different things, like it all kind of funnels into understanding how to be a creative and like what it takes to do that. And as we said before, it does transfer back into the job, but it's a very different way of thinking. And so for me, it's always just been like, what does it take to keep it going, keep it running, and do it in a way where I feel very fulfilled on both sides of the coin. And I feel very, very lucky to still feel fulfilled in a lot of ways by both sides of the job and the work that I'm doing as well. I just wish it would take a lot less time to make films. That's the only downside. So,
Would you say you live by your calendar? You time block a lot. That's the one way that you keep it sustainable. And also as a follow-up as well, would you say your current way is sustainable?
Yes, I would say calendar is an essential way for sure, especially when I'm also balancing things like freelance and other projects, which are often editing, centric. You do need to kind of like set limits at each level, depending on what's going on. Is it sustainable? I've learned as I've grown in the company, and as I've grown in responsibilities, that
Yeah.
parts of that can be and parts cannot.
Yeah.
And where I think a lot of people get it wrong in terms of
Mm.
like making stuff happen, especially
Yeah.
from a film perspective, is that it's a collaborative process. I've
Mm.
talked about this a bit already, but like,
Mm.
you
Mm.
know, film only happens on a very like grandiose level when you have lots and lots of people working together to make the vision. And the
Mm.
reason why Milder Weather got out of my head and in onto a film set is because I had people around me that were willing to support that vision and make it
Mm.
happen. You
Mm.
know, we had a writers group which went on for about 6 or 7 months in late 2024, early 2025,
Mm.
where there were maybe 6 different films being incubated to actually be produced and shot over
Mm.
2025 and 2026. Now,
Mm.
of those films, I think all 5 have been in production or are wrapping up production right now. And
Right
that
now.
purely came from people that were
Yeah.
actually, you know, either through Synthesia, the Synthesia network, or people outside of it that I
Sure.
connected with that
Yeah.
were like, we want to make art. We want to make stuff creatively.
Yeah.
And that's a really huge part of actually making it sustainable. It's like, do
Yeah.
you have people that actually support you on your journey of making that happen?
And
Because
hold
you
you
as an
accountable.
individual, exactly,
Yeah.
holding you accountable, that's the main
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that, you're going to procrastinate. You're just
Yeah.
going to be like, I can't do it. I'm tired. I'm lazy.
Sure.
I've been
Yeah.
working for 13 hours or whatever. Like, I don't have time for
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, it's those people that are like, come on, Kyle, let's keep going. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
And that's huge these days. I think that is a very good motivator. And the further down the line we look in the next year or so, like this is going to be a really important part of getting like my next short film off the ground, which is going to be, you know, a larger budget piece where there's going to be lots of stakeholders involved to make it happen. And it still will take a long time, but it's one of those things where I will have those people around me that will say, let's get it done. Let's make it happen. And I can workshop it and try to figure out what I want to do with it and go from there.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah,
that's huge. That's huge. But I'm also quite curious as well. Like, were there moments where you felt creatively burnt out overall, just because on one hand, your day job, 9 to 6, that's creatively demanding on another part of your brain, and also with the filmmaking, that's another demanding side, which takes a lot creatively. How have you dealt with those moments?
I've definitely experienced burnout on a couple occasions, especially earlier this year as well. There was some moments where I was like, wow, I'm handling so much right now.
Yeah.
And when it comes to that, you know what it really is, Idris? I think it's literally just taking a break. You know, like actually sitting down and saying, okay, I've done way too much. I need to sit down, just relax a little bit, figure out what I need to do, put some things on the side, and then prioritize. See what you actually need to focus on. What's the most important thing in the chain of things you need to do? Prioritize that, and then work your way down and say, okay, now I can go and do this sort of thing or this other project. And for a while earlier this year, like Milder Weather had to be on the back burner because I had so many work projects to prioritize, or like freelance projects to prioritize, where it was like super quick deadlines, super quick turnarounds. So it's like, okay, I got to prioritize this first, do this, and then I can come back to the film. And thankfully, the film is now mostly out of my hands. Like I am directing it still, but it's like people are working on different levels of it at different points. And I am still involved, but it's also just like they're taking it and doing what they need to do on that front. And then I can come back to it later. But yeah, it's just like, it's more like really making sure your time is managed well. And then when it's not, reassessing, reevaluating, what do you need to do here to actually, get yourself back on track? And that can take a while. It took me like a week to be like, okay, let's just chill. Let's just figure out what we need to do. And then go from there. And I was back on my feet, but it was hard. It was really hard. It's not easy to go through periods like that. And, you need to kind of just be aware of yourself and be aware of like what level you're at and where things are, and when to take a step back and say, okay, maybe I'm doing a little bit too much here,
If someone were to ask you, hey, Kyle, I'm thinking about starting a short film. Obviously, one of the ways that people usually give, I'm sure the advice that you might give to someone is, hey, just start. But how would that person actually realistically start? Like, say, would they need, I don't know, 300 pounds? Would that be enough if they want to shoot like a low budget film, for example, just to get like boots off the ground?
Yeah, I mean, it totally depends on the scale and scope of the idea. like if you're doing something that is a little bit more complex with like camera movement or acting or whatever, like, yeah, you could theoretically do something, very small scale if you have the resources or whatever. But let's say if you didn't, it'd just be finding people that can actually make it happen with you. Again,
Mm,
film is a very collaborative process, right? I don't think anyone that, makes stuff on their own is going to get super far, even
yes.
if it takes them, years and years. Like there's a time frame, like if you're doing
Yeah.
everything on your own, it will take forever. If you're doing things
Yeah.
with people, that's going to, shorten things quite a bit, but
Yeah.
it can still take a while at this rate. It really just depends on like what your vision is and how you actually want to go about it, right?
Yeah.
And depending on that, you then have to ask yourself a bunch of other questions like,
Mm,
should I raise money for this? Should I, hire actors? Should I get a producer? At the
yeah.
end of the day, you're probably going to need to hire crew, and that
Yeah.
can be, quite a bit of money in itself as well. So it
Yeah.
really just depends. But if you're just starting, like let's say
Yeah.
you're just brand new, right?
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
don't know what you want to do. There's
Yeah.
a ton
No
of
network
resources
involved.
online.
Yeah.
Yeah, no network, right? You just kind of start on your own. Maybe you just watch some YouTube videos. There's a
Yeah.
lot of good resources out there, Go to film school,
Yeah.
A lot of people have different thoughts about that. I've gone to two different film programs and
Right.
learned a lot through those. My bachelor's and my master's were two different film programs. I went to
Right.
Minnesota State University, Moorhead,
Yeah.
for my bachelor's. And then I
Yeah.
came over to the University of Lincoln in 2021.
Yeah.
And like both of those had very different disciplines, very different projects and practices.
Mm,
That actually was a really great way to understand how you work with a team, how you
yes.
develop ideas, how you like also gives you like a trial run place to like really start to figure out what sort of type of narrative or creative person you are,
Yeah.
where you can just kind of throw things at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
And I would argue as well, like kind of help you find your creative voice in quotations, which is
Gotcha.
helpful. But yeah, like there's plenty of good resources. And then also, yeah, literally just start creating stuff. You can
Mm,
use your iPhone. You can use a camera, whatever you got lying around. Like it doesn't need to be super, you know, large scale production equipment. I
yeah.
have a red Komodo camera, which is like entry level cinema camera. And when I
Okay.
bought that, it was like $9,000, £9,000,
Holy
and
cow.
now it's like £2,000, and I rarely ever used it. Like it's not about the equipment; it's about
Yeah.
like how you're actually thinking about the scene and the cinematography and the lighting. And you know, I think what a lot of people get wrong too is that you have to do everything. You can
Yes.
specialize, and
Yeah.
especially in the context of the film industry, specializing is the best thing you can do, because
Mm,
that allows you then to like really nail a specific type of way of creating, whether it be mastering cinematography with lenses and cameras, or
mm,
doing lighting tests or whatever to become a
mm,
better gaffer.
mm.
Writing and directing is obviously very hard to get into professionally, so you have to have really good ideas for that, or have some track record of doing this stuff well for people to trust you with that. But even then, like if you just start doing stuff and you start creating, you can really start to figure out pretty quickly what are the types of stories that you want to do and how do you get there. And
Mm.
there's so many good resources online for that, I think, to start. So,
Do you have an example of a good resource online
oh
of
man,
the top of your
good
head?
question. I know of some channels. Danny
Yeah.
Gevirtz comes to mind.
Danny
He was one of
Givers.
the guys that was very, very influential. He's just kind of like a corporate run and gun guy, but he also does a lot of narrative documentaries. He did
Oh wow.
a narrative feature film that was like fully financed online through like
Yeah.
Kickstarter. Was really, really cool. There's a guy named Noor Nayaz who's really, really interesting.
Okay.
He's like I think he's based in Singapore, and
Okay.
does some really, really cool projects, where he does like corporate client projects for like Samsung and
Yeah.
all these other places. And it's very much like a like very aesthetically pleasing way of like thinking about how to create, and packages everything very, very nicely. But is also both those creators are very down to earth and very open
Yeah.
about their processes, which I think is very useful. And they were in different ways very good guidelines for me at different points in my filmmaking journey, that were like,
Yeah.
oh, these are actually really interesting ways of thinking about this,
Yeah.
and making stuff work and be good for myself. I was able to adapt their thinking into my own way of creating.
You mentioned something that I want to track back on a bit, where you said specializing is the key.
Yeah,
There's a saying which is like, what is it? Jack of all trades is a master of none, basically. Um,
yeah,
and I I can relate to that because I make music on the side as well, and
Yeah.
my first three songs, it was just end to end, produced, written, everything all by me. And I remember as soon as I met this producer, who I met, by the way, I don't know if you know of this. There's this boat on near, I think it's near Victoria or something, but it's like a pub as well. But like it's like a,
Yeah.
yeah, that one. So there was this like a creative event, and I went there. I went there on my own. There's loads of other people, and then I just bumped into this guy. We just started talking about music, and he was like, "Oh, I'm a producer." I was like, "Oh, no way!" And then the moment we start hitting it off, and then there was this one moment where I was like, "Oh, I have this project that I've been sitting on for like a year," and I went over to his studio, and he literally just did magic to it, and the song just
Yeah.
finished in the span of like 2 hours. I was like, "Dude, how the heck do you do this?" And he was like, "Well, you already just laid the foundations. I just made it extra nice." And I was like, "Wow, that's crazy." And
Well,
it goes back to the
you're hitting.
collaboration.
Yeah, and you're hitting on the other really great part of this too, which is networking. I
Yes,
mean, there are so many great events and things you can go to, no matter where
for
you
sure.
are in the world. You know,
Yeah,
London, of course, has a lot of really great networking events for film and the arts, and even music
yeah,
production and such. Like
yeah,
the opportunities that you can do to connect with people who have the same interests. Sometimes that also just gets the ball rolling. You
yeah,
know, and that, like you said, I think can be a really great motivator because again, it's all about people. It's all about like working with
exactly.
people together to make this stuff happen. You
Yeah,
can, rely on yourself to do all this stuff, but
yeah,
it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to burn you out. You got to have
correct.
people that can actually support you and be your champions.
Mm. I think in my eyes, would I change my approach for my first three songs? I wouldn't, because it taught me the foundations of what actually goes into things. But now I
Yes.
see the huge value in actually outsourcing areas which you may not be the greatest in, but someone is better than you, and that you trust in their abilities. And
And
I
we
think
haven't talked about this as well, but I think it's
yeah,
also important mentioning, just because this is also about marketing and social, that
yes,
like in the social space, actually knowing how to do a lot of this stuff, even if it's at kind of a basic level, is
mm,
so integral to getting work in the creative spaces with like social media and marketing, where
right,
it's a very different from film, whereas
yes,
film is like, yeah, you should specialize, you should do one thing.
yeah,
Social, if you can shoot, like work a camera, you can do some like basic lighting, know how to
yeah,
work a microphone, like
yeah,
that is great. People are like,
yeah, yeah,
yes, please, I want
yeah,
more of this. And
yeah,
that has put me in some really great positions in the last couple of years where it's been like, do this, do this, do this.
yeah,
Great,
yeah,
go
yeah,
do this. And that's obviously stressful. That can be difficult because then it's like, oh, you might not know how to do something very well, but
yeah,
you at least have a very basic understanding of those skills. And to your
yeah,
point, it's like you should just go through maybe making a film on your own or maybe making a music
yeah,
track on your own just to
yeah,
see the process and do it once.
yes,
But
yeah,
then if you have the ability then to bring other people into it, a lot of the Synthesia projects we do, for instance, are multiple people working on it. So like the skits and stuff that we did,
right,
the hackathon video
yeah,
that you talked about
yeah,
earlier,
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
was a combination of three of us working on that over the course of
mm,
a couple hours. You know, we all had to pitch in, and like one of us was doing camera, one of us was doing microphone, one of us
yes,
was acting. You then
yeah,
would switch it up depending on what we were doing and like what we were
yeah,
creating. And often with that, we were also writing it on the fly. It wasn't like a thing that was like fully scripted. We had a base idea, make an ESPN style video about
yes,
this
yeah,
hackathon and then figure out a way to tell that story creatively. So
yeah,
for us, it was like, okay, we're going to start with like a little play by play thing. We're going to see what the vibe of the event is like. And then, it was us. We were like, oh, what if we cut away and it's just them working and it's really boring?
yeah,
And it was like, okay. And then so we did that. And then it was like, okay, we need like an MVP, because one of the things that they told us was like, you need to show off this like Technic massage booth thing that they
all
have,
right,
because it was like a
yeah,
nice like it was like a thing that the engineers got to have if they needed to like relieve their back and everything.
oh
And
wow,
so we were like, okay, we're gonna do that. We're gonna get a little shot of that. And so we were like, oh, let's focus on like an MVP who was just one of our friends, at the
yeah,
company. And we're
yeah,
like, okay, we're gonna do like a little interview. We're gonna do like a like on the sidelines, and we just riffed it. And
yeah,
that content, I think that kind of content where you link it to a larger event or you link it to a larger kind of story that the company is sharing and
yeah,
wants to share, that
yeah,
makes the best, I think, social content when you're conveying your brand and conveying your message.
mm,
But yeah, all those skills I think are, going back to what we were saying before, all the skills of like kind of knowing how to do things at a basic level in
Mm,
marketing are very, very, very useful, I think,
mm, mm.
and can be, yeah, very essential, I think, to getting into like entry level jobs and stuff,
Yeah.
and then actually showing how you use those and why you use them the way you do.
Yeah. No, that's amazing, man. We are almost coming to time. And usually during this section, I like to ask my guests some quick fire rounds of questions.
Okay,
I'd love to hear your take on this. So we're going to start. And first question is favorite city to visit and why?
gosh, uh, favorite place that I visited that I can think of off the top of my head, Montenegro, Kotor,
Ooh,
Montenegro.
yeah.
I visited when I was 17. I was on a cruise with my family.
Yeah.
I did kayaking in this basin. They have a basin there where the cruise ports, they go into this port, and it was lovely. I mean, one of the
Yeah.
coolest places I've ever been. I've not been back since, but it's
Okay.
always been one of those places that I've wanted to go back to and
Okay.
and visit. Just a beautiful like city. It's surrounded by mountains and everything. Gorgeous weather, nice
Yeah.
people. Was really, really cool. I'd love to go back there someday.
People don't usually talk about Montenegro as a place to visit as well. So would you say it's an underrated place?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely underrated.
Okay, well, I
Yeah.
should add it to my list. Moving on. Favorite movie, and this is something I'm very interested to hear from your take.
Dude, you asked me the worst question. Like people usually I can give you so I have a lot of answers here. Usually I
Sure.
go to four.
Yeah.
Um, do you care if I'm niche? I'm gonna go real niche, I think.
No, no, go for it.
All right. So Don't Look Back, Bob Dylan. It's
Ah.
about Bob Dylan in the 60s, directed
Yeah.
by a guy named D.A. Pennebaker. It was about Bob Dylan's 1965 European tour around the UK.
Oh.
Now, from a documentary perspective, it's one of the coolest documentaries about modern celebrity. It
Yeah.
still relates to so many crazy things today about how celebrities are portrayed in the media, how words are twisted, and how an artist is kind of struggling to like define himself
Yeah.
in this kind of sea of journalism and like all these people thinking and kind of projecting what he is as an artist.
Mm,
Even if you don't like Bob Dylan, I think it's a really, really cool documentary that I'd really recommend. There's a
amazing.
movie called Before Sunrise, which is directed by a guy named Richard Linklater. He did Boyhood and Dazed and
Oh, okay.
Confused.
Yeah.
Before Sunrise is like a romantic drama following these two people that meet on a train. One's
Yeah.
American, one's French.
Yeah.
It was a major basis for 6 Hours Indefinitely and then A Birth of Kamar.
Okay.
But it's
Nice.
very conversational. It's very romantic. Shot in Vienna. I mean, gorgeous movie. There's
Oh,
two other ones that follow it, which are also very good.
yeah.
Aside from that, Marriage Story, which is done by a guy named Noah Baumbach, that's got Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson in it.
Oh, cool.
It's a really interesting take on divorce and
Yes.
the lives between two people growing up in both Los Angeles and New York.
Uh-huh.
Shot incredibly well, amazing acting, amazing performances. And then what would be my fourth? There's a movie called Tar, which was directed by a guy named Todd Field. It has Kate Blanchett in it. And it's
Uh-huh.
about a composer that is living in Berlin. She's like world famous. But over the course of the film, her life slowly starts to deteriorate. And there's not much
Ooh.
more I want to say about it because
Okay.
it's one of those
Okay.
films that, like, when you watch it, it's very like, it starts to like pick up. And some of the stuff in there is so shocking. You're like, whoa, this is not what I expected the film to be.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it goes in so many interesting directions. And by the time it wraps up, I was like, I could watch another 3 more hours of this. Like, it feels
Wow.
like I could just keep going. It
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
puts you in this headspace of this very meticulous, very like hardcore, musician, composer, and her life as it's just spiraling out of control, which is really, really good. But I have plenty of other ones as well. Like Star Wars was like the main thing that got into filmmaking and stuff. But that's
Okay.
all I'll say about that. There's my answers.
Dude,
Yeah.
those are all strong answers. I'm definitely gonna check those out, but particularly Tar, because yeah, I like watching ones where they start taking a turn for the worse. Not particularly because I just like when shit hits the fan, but more like how does it
Well, it's
develop? And-
interesting, right? It's like
Yeah.
it puts your characters in very interesting situations, and like this was
Mm,
a huge part of Milder Weather too. Like kind of seeing the deterioration of a couple, in
mm,
real time. There's
mm.
something really interesting about like looking at things from a very different angle than they're portrayed in real life. And film gives you the opportunity to explore like different places, different mindsets and mentalities that you yourself might not experience, which is, you know, eye-opening. And I think
Yeah.
that kind of film, is really, really important to watch and to take in.
Huge. If I have time, might tune into that like later on, but we'll see. Favorite food or cuisine to eat?
I really like Italian. I'm a huge
Nice.
Italian fan. That might be stereotypical, but like, you know, like pasta. We got
Yeah.
Spaghetti House here in London,
Yes.
which is not even Italian, but like it's good. It's great, you know. I'm a huge fan of steak. I like steak a lot. I don't have it very
Okay.
often, but like
Yeah.
that's pretty good. But yeah, like any like a carbonara or you
Mm.
know, like Milanese, fantastic. It's really, really good.
I have a friend that works in Osteria Angelina. If you've been there,
Oh, I've not, but I know about it.
yeah, Liverpool Street. It's dope. It's dope. And
Very cool.
I don't know if you tried Bancone as well.
I haven't. No, I need to check
Yeah.
that out.
Yeah, silk handkerchief pasta. Yeah, yeah. It's probably the cheapest on the menu as well, but it's pretty good. So yeah,
Sweet.
yeah.
Awesome.
Favorite song?
Oh gosh, that's really tough. My Sweet Lord George Harrison, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, really good. I think it's one of those songs that like when you listen to it, it is so life affirming. It's joyous. There's like this kind of the repeated mantras and everything. And it just like every time I listen to it, it's always one of those songs. Like it's not even a hype up song or anything. It's just kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's a nice reminder that like life is really great and really
yeah,
special and
yeah.
it transcends beyond so many things and beyond ourselves, you know, which is good.
That's great. And favorite quote?
My gosh, quote. I don't even know. I don't even know if I
Yeah,
have a favorite quote. What's your
yeah.
favorite quote?
Mine is "Fortune favors the brave," and
Oh, that's
it's from
good.
this book called Cain and Abel by Jeffrey Archer. And when I saw that when I was growing up, I was like, oh, it's like money. I equated fortune and money, for like from just being brave. But now I equate it to more of putting yourself out there, taking risks, and then opportunities will come. So that's what I took away from it, basically.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah,
I don't have one. I
that's cool.
honestly don't. I don't have enough quotes in my backlog that I could
Yeah, yeah, no,
pull
no, all
from.
good,
But
all good. No worries. What does locking in mean to you?
locking in means giving something the amount of time and energy that you think is acceptable enough to make an impact in the
Mm,
places that you yourself want to make an impact in,
mm,
right?
mm, mm.
So take my kind of my goal of sharing human stories, right?
Yes. Yeah.
What does that look like on a high level? It means, you know, looking for opportunities to find unique situations, scenarios, people, companies, businesses, influencers, journalists that can tap into something or share a story that might be unfamiliar or different to people, and then send that out into the world and hear different people's thoughts and start a conversation, you know.
Yeah.
On the film side, it's like understanding what things are relevant in my world or my friends' worlds and distilling it down into an idea that can then be placed into a film or a
Mm,
short or whatever it might be, and
mm,
then going on the film festival circuit and seeing what people take from that. It doesn't have to be exactly what's in my brain, but
mm,
you know, oftentimes I prefer it's not. You know, I oftentimes would just like people to make it their own thing, and that's happened
mm,
on so many occasions, and it's so
mm,
special, I think.
mm,
But being able to share stories, being able to engage in discussion about the world and how we think and how we are as humans
mm.
is so important today. And looking ahead, you know, I think it's going to be even more important in this age of artificial intelligence. And
For sure.
you know, yeah, it's very, very important. So
It sounds like storytelling is sharing human storytelling is your North Star.
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Love that. And what would you say is next for you, Carl? Like, what should people look out for? How can people get in touch with you if they do want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm constantly working on lots of different projects across the board. Synthesia continues on after
Yeah.
3 years, and the journey has been fantastic and wonderful. I am still doing lots of amazing PR projects and comms projects. I do freelance, so You know,
Yeah.
if anyone's interested in post-production work or any other like editing, ideation, content creation stuff, at
Yeah.
Kyle Odefey on Instagram or my
Nice.
LinkedIn is the
Yeah.
easiest way to contact me. In the grand scheme of things, I'm still going to be creating shorts. Milder Weather is going to be coming out later this year on the film festival
Woohoo!
circuit. We've got an Instagram page for that. In search for
Nice.
Milder Weather. Milder Weather Film, I believe, is what it's called. If you
Yeah.
want to go check that out. I'm working on a brand new film as well on the side now, which I don't think will be out for another year and a half.
Yeah.
But that's very exciting. Without saying too much because it's so
Yeah.
early days,
Yeah.
that's a film about, you know, kind of like everlasting friendship and the pursuit of change. And I don't
Oh,
want to dive
wow.
any more
Yeah. Yeah.
any more deep into that, but like that's where I'm at right now. And it's a very personal film, but something I'm very, very excited about. So, you know, stay tuned for that in the next year or so. Yeah.
That's amazing. No, this is really amazing. And by the way, guys, I'm gonna put all of Kyle's links, as always, in yeah, on YouTube, Spotify, etc., wherever this goes and gets distributed. But Kyle, what an episode! What I can't believe time has gone by so quick, and I feel really bad that like yeah, we've gone way over. But
Oh no,
I
dude, this has been
really
so fun.
I really really appreciate the time just to hear your journey and how amazing it is and how awesome, and also just like hear what your North Star is, how you've been balancing both sides, how also it's really cool that your day job allows and encourages everyone to just pursue their side hustle as well. So yeah, no, this has been such a great conversation, man. Time really went by super quickly. So but yeah, I really appreciate it. And but yeah, guys, stay tuned for this episode when it comes out, but also stay tuned for the next one as always. And I will see you guys soon. Bye.
See ya.